Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce, the Redneck Radio Man, and we're brought to you by Radio Network. And joining me today is going to be Phyllis King. We're going to be talking about her newest book, The Energy of Abundance. And this is going to be a kind of a new subject for me, I think. So I'm going to waddle through this and see how much she's going to teach me during the course of this show. Real quick, before we get started, the call in numbers 632-832-7904. And Phyllis, can you give us your website address real quick?
Oh, thanks, Roy. Royce, it's my name, Phyllis King, Phyllis, phyllisking.com.
All righty then. I usually like to start this here show off by having the guests kind of introduce themselves to let the audience know a little something about them and what got them interested in the topic they wrote about.
Well, working from the end back here, I think what got me interested in abundance in general is struggle. I got tired of struggling around certain things, whether it was love or specifically money. I just got tired of it. I got tired of wondering how I was going to pay this bill, that bill, and in the book there's a story about how be ready to pay my rent or my mortgage, and as soon as that was paid, I was worrying where next month's money was going to come from, and that got old. I got really old. And then transfer that same way into relationships. Got tired of hard relationships, and so I just dove into the abundance topic because I wanted to crack it for myself. And I'm a coach. I'm an intuitive. This is my business, and I also wanted to be able to help other people crack it in their own lives.
Right now, I understand you're also a psychic.
Yeah.
When do you do readings? I mean, people just call your house, or you got a place on your website for them to contact you, or what?
Yeah, I do readings. I mean, that's where it actually all began, Royce, because I started having experiences when I was a child. And I didn't ask for them. I never thought when I was 5, when I grew up, I want to be a psychic. I didn't even know what the word was. But I kept on having all these experiences happen. And then a turning point came when I was about 19, and a friend of mine who'd passed away in a car accident actually showed up in my house 3 months after he died, and he looked like a person. And it was terrifying. It was terrifying and amazing all at the same time, because it let me know that life didn't end with the body, and it sort of instilled this sense of peace inside of me. Here I am, 19, feeling like a peaceful person, but at that time I said, I got to get on top of this. I don't want this stuff happening to me. So it wasn't about I want to be a psychic. It was about how do I get in charge of this stuff. And so doing readings just sort of started to come as part of the process. And then I just wanted to expand more into understanding, why, how, and how can I explain to people, no, you're not going to get this job, why not? Or no, this relationship isn't going to work out, so why not? And that's where all the spiritual foundation stuff comes in. But yeah, I do readings, I do coaching, and you can book on my website. I have an office. I work from home a lot. I travel around. I do it all.
So I take it you're nowhere near 19 now, are you?
Now, that's not a very nice question. I'm kidding.
I'm sorry.
I've been doing this 30-plus years at this point, Royce.
Yeah. Well, you'll have to forgive me. I'm a little bit of a redneck, and that little naughty sense of humor tends to creep in.
I love it.
But what can you tell us about the energy game?
Well, this is a term I've kind of come to use. I mean, I talk about the energy game all the time to people because everything is energy to me. Everything is moving around. Like when I look at someone, it's like moving pieces. I'm big into quantum physics, looking at what happens at that subatomic particle level. I like to talk about atoms and molecules. And when you talk about anger or depression or fear, they all have frequencies and vibrations and densities to them. And so when you start looking at life or situations through that lens, then you can play with it. You can move it around. You can intentionally decide, well, I'm going to pretend I'm happy in this moment, and I call it inserting high-frequency vibrations. I'm going to I'm making soup in my life or a stew, I'm making chili, whatever, and I want to put this ingredient in, and that will make it sweeter. And so what I'm basically telling people, this is after, as I said, 30 plus years of watching this, it does make a difference that the divine, God, whatever, doesn't really recognize the difference between real or imagined. And so we sort of, if we're in the driver's seat and, play with energy, we can affect our outcomes, and it goes easier for us. Take charge, essentially.
Could it be maybe that the difference between real and imagined is so minute and so moot that it's not worth considering?
Huh. Interesting.
I mean,
Yeah,
science would tell us, and I'm sorry, I didn't know you
no.
speak, but science would tell you that everything is, I think, a wave originally until it collapses into a particle, and until that actual moment, it doesn't know if it's going to be a wave or a particle. That could correlate to real and imaginary, I guess you might say, as depending on which one the class. And maybe that could possibly be just the only difference.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you said that, and I agree in many respects. And I think from anybody's perspective, if I'm sitting here sobbing my eyes out, whether it's someone else experiences that as real, it's certainly real to me. Whether I made it up all in my head, why I should be sobbing my eyes out. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page there.
Well, your book kind of indicates to people they can have just about almost anything they want. Is this really true that people have got this ability? They don't have to live the way they're living, like in want and need?
Yeah. From my perspective, I guess you'd have to get inside of my perspective and say, okay, maybe I'll try it. I can get with that. That feels okay to me. And my perspective is pretty much a spiritual one, and the energy game combined. And you have to get into a rhythm and a flow with your life. And if you learn how to get in the flow, stay out of resistance, and then be proactive, you can allow in and have whatever you really want. And there's so many different ways to go about that. But I've been able to master that in my life, to have whatever I want. And it's pretty easy for the most part for me, because I've practiced all these principles. But I guess you'd have to try on my perspective and see if you can get on board with it, and then try the formulas in your own life. And there are specific formulas, Royce, in the book. It's not general. Law of attraction and prosperity and abundance, all that. A lot of times it's real general. Think happy thoughts or whatever. Not that you shouldn't do that, but mine says do this, do that, do this, do that. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like making food, for example. There's a recipe for each thing you want to get.
Pretty much. And I talk a lot about cultivating consciousness, that you're cultivating, like I love to use that soup or stew metaphor. Your life is it's this creative, delicious process, and whatever you're putting into that soup or that stew that's going to determine what it tastes like. And if you stay in that state of mind that you're always trying to create something that's delicious and satisfying, and you don't put yucky stuff in there, you're creating an atmosphere, a consciousness, if you will, that is abundant. And energetically, when you magnetize those abundant feelings into life, life reciprocates and says, here, okay. And it doesn't mean we'll never get a challenge. That's not life. But what it means is that you find your solutions really easily. You find yourself in the place you need to be with the people you need to be, that life just sort of organizes to support you. I think of this story, one of my favorite teachers many, many years ago, Leo Buscaglia, who wrote a book called Love. He was one of the original self-help guru types. He talked about the synchronicity of being in a hospital visiting someone, and he collapsed on the floor and needed the quadruple bypass surgery. And he thought, now how great is that I was right there in the hospital and they could wheel me right in. Had I not been there, I would have passed. And so if you look at it through that context, life was arranging around him to support him in that way. He obviously he was genetically or whatever predisposed to having this condition, but he ended up in a place to get great care immediately.
Some people would have called that coincidence. Others would have said there is no coincidence.
Well, I have a good friend named Daniel Brinkley who's had some incredible near-death experiences. He was also in the Marines, but he says, I believe in coincidence. I've just never seen one.
So what you're describing here, would you consider it maybe kind of like a form of The Secret?
Well, yeah, but sort of drilled down. And actually, Dr. Joe Vitale, who was in The Secret, wrote the foreword to the book. But it is the same idea. My work is really based on feelings, what we're feeling, and how do we adjust those feelings we're having, because those are the potent magnetizers or attractors. But yeah, really creating that vision and matching our behaviors to the vision we have for what we want in our life, and how you can do that efficiently and productively.
So it's not as easy as sitting there saying, I want to have $200 million in the bank, visualizing it in your mind's eye, and then go sitting in front of the TV and waiting for it.
Well, I guess that would be one way, but you have a long wait.
Yeah, you have a really long wait.
There's things like simple things like you have to stop resisting what life shows you. People have to learn to get out of resistance with what life gives them and start looking at it through a different lens. So like the story I told with the guy in the hospital, Leo Biscaya, he looked at it through a different lens. And you have to learn to not attach to the outcome you want. You have to learn to be, as we call, in the present moment. As you're cooking your stew, you don't know what it's going to taste like till it's simmered for a while. You have to just put the correct ingredients in and let that be enough. And so people have to learn to detach from their outcomes. People also have to learn to stop identifying their value. Am I a good person? Am I worth anything based upon what their bank account says or how attractive their partner is or what kind of car they drive? They have to do what they do for, what do you take? The steps you take, how you spend your time should be feeding you and teaching you what you're made of. I mean, that's what challenge is about, that we can honor our experience. And so the more we honor ourselves in that way rather than looking externally for value, then it sort of automatically comes. If you're building your inner stock market, if you will, and then you're resonating that into life, and life responds. And that's the internal balancing is what we're all trying to master. And when you master that, that's when it becomes easy to say, okay, how can I go make $200 million? Well, I'm going to probably need to be in the oil or energy business, or I'm going to have, you could strategically position yourself, but is that what you really want? I mean, often people think money or whatever will fill them up in some way, and it doesn't.
Then they get it.
So you have to find out what's really going to fill me up.
You kind of remind me of a joke, or you might call it a joke type story that I heard many years ago about a guy that goes and gives his life to God, and God promises him he'll always look out for him and never let anything happen to him. And then the guy goes home, and a year or two later, a big flood comes around, and he goes outside and waits in the yard, and a boat comes by and says, hey, you need to get on and get you out of here. No, God's going to look out for me. The boat comes by about an hour or two later and tries to get him to get on again. He's still holding on to the fact that God's looking out for him. They come back about an hour later. The man's on top of his roof sitting on the chimney, and they're telling him, this is the last boat. You don't get on now, you're gone. No, God's got me covered. So, the guy drowns and dies and goes to heaven. And he looked at God and says, I thought you were going to look out for me. He said, well, what do you expect? I sent you 2 boats and a helicopter. 3 boats. But you were talking about, expecting things to turn out a certain way. It doesn't, the universe or God, either one, doesn't necessarily work exactly the way you expect, do they?
Exactly. You sort of have to see the opportunity where it is, right? It's great. I love that. It's a great joke.
I always thought it was kind of funny. It was kind of like the guy that went and prayed to God to win the lottery, and 3 or 4 times after he lost the lottery, after praying to God, God finally told him, help me out, buy a ticket.
I love it.
But I mean, seriously, I think in life, and your book is probably making this point, somewhere down the line, that even if with the universe or God working on your side, you have to meet the other half of the way.
Hmm. Exactly. I mean, it's like I think that's how we find out what we're made of when we contribute to our own process, when we overcome challenge. That's how we get the self-worth. That's how we find out what we're made of. That's how we see our own divinity, if you will, that we see we can do anything, but we have to teach ourselves that. How great is that it's a collaboration, that you have some say-so over how your life can turn out. I think that's an incredible thing, a wonderful thing to acknowledge, rather than life is just happening to me and it's all fated and, my ship is sunk, or, however you want to view it.
So these techniques you're using that you mentioned in your book, you use yourself in your own life, and they do actually work for you. How about some of your clientele? Have they had good luck using this method?
Well, I am as busy as somebody can be. I've got a lot of people who are doing really well, and I've been doing this for a long time, and so I would think that if I was full of it and things that weren't working, I wouldn't be in business. And I do have a lot of success stories of people, and I can tell you, Royce, a funny story. Maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I think I told this in the book. I'm not remembering this minute, but I had a whole bunch of clients who were just doing fantastic, because I do business coaching, all kinds of different coaching. I go over the spectrum, and my life was still kind of bump, 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 hit and miss. And it was like, what the heck? Why is everybody doing good? And I go, light bulb. Why don't I take my own advice, which is something I tell a lot of people. And I sat down and I looked at the challenges I was having, and I said, what would I tell a client? And I told myself those things, and thank goodness they really worked. And that was a real turning point for me. And it's been darn good ever since that. So people do need to take their own advice. But, I have this tagline to my title, The Common Sense Psychic.
Right, I saw that.
And it's because I like things that work. I'm psychic, but I'm not really that much into woo-woo, this or that. It's really got to work, or I'm not interested any more than anyone else would be.
Well, you're also known as something of a comedian, too, aren't you?
Well, I love to have fun and crack as many jokes as I can. I can't tell a joke to save my life like you can tell a joke, but I do like to make fun of whatever comes up in conversation. And when I'm in front of an audience or whatnot and we're having fun, I like to poke fun. Because, again, the energy game, humor and enthusiasm, those are high-frequency vibrations. And anytime you can insert those into your scenario, just making fun, even if you're in the depths of despair, if you can make fun of yourself and the funny look you have on your face, that's of benefit to you. So I'm also playing the energy game with people when I poke at them and have fun.
Well, I'm the kind of fellow myself that personally, I like to play word games, especially words that can be used in more than one way or more than one context, that have more than one meaning, use it to just mess with people's minds. In other words, I find that amusing.
I love it.
Which is what I just around the house and I get bored.
I love it. That's great. That's great.
But what would you say are some of the big hindrances or roadblocks that people put up in their own way?
Well, the first thing I see a lot of is that people won't give themselves a chance at something, whether it's love, whether it's a career path, whether it's whatever. They cut themselves off before they even begin. They get a great idea or they feel they want to embark on something, and then they'll start talking themselves out of it. Well, so-and-so has already done this, or if I do that, then this will happen. And then they stop before they even begin. I think that happens a lot. The next thing is I think people have unrealistic expectations, or they have these, I call it, attachment to time. Well, if something doesn't happen by, November 2015, I'm out of this. They won't give a process a chance to develop. There's a real inflexibility and a fear around letting things evolve at a normal and natural progression, especially if they're starting a business or even in relationships. People have all these expectations rather than just being with the situation and understanding what's going on. So I would say those attachments to the expectations is pretty big. And a lack of commitment. People get started in something and then, they get scared or they hit a rough patch and they just give up. So those are three I see a lot of. I would say that's probably the top three. And there's other things that go around it, but that lack of commitment, the expectations, and then giving up before you start. My goodness.
Yeah, I've seen some people try something for 5 minutes and swear they gave it a fair chance. And in their opinion, they did.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Of course, we're talking about their opinion.
Right.
Those are the key operative words.
Yeah.
And
of course, in my book, and most of my work, Royce, it's most about helping people expand their perspective, the lens through look at life through a bigger lens. Stretch yourself a bit. Don't just default to the first reaction that comes, or your three of your friends who tell you you're crazy for thinking such a thing or whatever. But really learn how to honor your own process. And like the guy in the hospital, Leo Biscaglia, this is actually a benefit that I'm going through this challenge at this moment. But
I think you're right. You're going to run into naysayers everywhere you go, and if you listen to all of them, they'll talk you out of everything you come up with.
Well, and I love that phrase. You've probably heard this, that people who've given up on their own dreams aren't going to be able to support you in yours. It's totally true. Because what does that say about them if you succeed?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you on that one there. Me personally, I don't believe that there's anything you're ever going to accomplish in life without having the determination and the hope and faith in yourself to stick with it, until you actually do accomplish it. And sometimes, even then, you're going to have to switch the way you're going about it to make it work.
Oh, you're so right, Royce. I couldn't agree more. It's like courage and determination, and then you have to be flexible. Something comes about that you weren't anticipating, you have to be able to adjust. You have to be able to shift what you're doing and move in another direction. Absolutely.
I know when I first started my show at Blog Talk Radio, when I was on their stream, and I was with them for like 5 years, but for the first 2 years, it seemed like I couldn't hardly get anybody into the live chat room. Everybody wanted to attend the archives. I had a fantastic audience, just nobody live. And I had an opportunity to give up, and I'll be honest with you, over a 2-year period, I got discouraged many times. But somehow I just couldn't bring myself to give up, because I've always been one of those never say die type personalities, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I would just keep trying, and I'd try something different here, something different there. But eventually, within a 2-year period, my chat room was always full, and I'd become a preferred host over there. And I was number 2 in the paranormal genre, and in the top 20 of all the entire shows on the whole network.
Wow, that's incredible.
All of that mainly because I stuck with it for 2 whole years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that just goes to show how right you are.
Well, thanks for saying so. But you proved it. Thank you for proving it.
Well, yeah, there's so much of the time you can tell people this stuff. You can look at them and tell they don't believe you. They think you're just delusioning yourself. You're a dreamer. Then you have to ask yourself, who's delusioning who? Right.
Well, as you said, the proof is in the pudding. If I'm living a life that's really abundant and I have everything that I want and I feel confident and secure that I can have anything I want, and I am not afraid about what's going to be happening in the future, that I'm certain everything's going to be good for me, and you, not you, but the general population, you, doesn't feel that way, I think that pretty much says it all. I'm not running around the tail wagging the dog here. And I think that's the measure. Is your life giving you what you want? Do you have confidence? Do you feel that you can have anything you want? And do you know how to make it happen? I mean, do you have the tools, the information? And I think that's the measure people should look at to see if I or people like me are delusional or not. And if this is what delusion is, I'm staying here.
You would say, in all honesty, everything starts with the individual themselves and moves outward.
Mm-hmm. Well, it is, because we have choice at any moment. How am I going to respond to this situation? How am I going to think about it? What's my reaction? What kind of feelings am I going to consume about this? Am I going to be mad? Am I going to be glad? Am I going to be scared? How am I going to interpret this? So we're always reacting and responding to life, and it's energetic again. It's all energy again. And it ends up, in a certain way, being simple math. 2 plus 2 equals 4. If you put two elements of a certain frequency in, you'll get 2 elements of a certain frequency back. It's not that simplistic, because, again, I've talked about creating a consciousness, so you are creating a whole state of being, and that over time becomes more refined, but that's the essence of it.
Kind of sort of like a mindset?
A mindset, but maintaining the energy. So, for instance, Royce, if I'm driving down the freeway and somebody flips me off because they don't like how I'm driving or gives me a dirty look, I can look at that and I can get mad right back and flip them off right back and yell at them. Or I can go, do I really want to go there? Do I want to feel that way? Do I want to act like that? Not really. I'm not really interested in going there. I'm not going to relinquish my center of well-being because somebody else didn't like something I did.
Plus, you never know which one of them have a gun in their glove box.
Well, there you go, especially in this day and age, right?
I ain't going to kid you. When my wife first got married, she got out of the van because there was a big line of traffic. She didn't want to wait for it. She was late for work. Decided she'd walk the rest of the way. And I watched her get out of the van and start walking, and she had accidentally stepped out a little bit into the street a little bit while she was walking, and some guy had to slam his brakes, and he started yelling and screaming at her, and she started yelling and screaming back at him.
Oh my!
I saw him lean over and reach toward the glove box. Oh, I made a beeline to get over there and pick her up before something went wrong.
Oh man! Wow! Yeah.
And I'm like, that's a classic case of somebody allowing the emotions to be in control where they should be in control.
Mm-hmm. Great point. And I know some of the things I tell my clients around this when, everybody gets in situations, but, when I'm in a situation with someone, especially like a customer service person or someone I don't really know who's really stressed out or upset or whatever, I do my best to look at that and go, oh, well, that person's having a hard day. This is all in my mind. They're having a hard day. It's not about me. How can I make it better for them? What kind of vibes can I send to them, even in my mind? Like, how can I make it better? And, 9 times out of 10, when I take that approach, I end up getting the best service, And so rather than going, oh, I'm so irritated that this person isn't being a good customer service person and they're not doing their job, I don't go down that road. Rather, I go, okay, what can I contribute to this situation on my end so that I'm not participating in that I'm actually being benevolent and kind and understanding, even if it's just in my mind. And it's always amazing to me how that ends up benefiting me in the long run.
Oh, I have no doubt of that in my military mind, as they used to say. I mean, I always taught my kids about how you treat people is going to depend on how they're going to treat you. You teach people things like what you'll put up with, like how you want to be treated and things like that by your actions toward them and people around you. I mean, I could tell you right now, I could walk into any store in this neighborhood where I've already been before, and faces will light up. People will be smiling. You'll be, hey, how you doing? They'll be grabbing stuff off the shelf and putting it on the counter for me and, stuff like that. but I've always been friendly with them, in other words.
Right, right.
Because these people that work in these stores, they have to contend with people with a bad attitude all day, every day. People come in there just being cut off 5 times on the last block, and they're in a cranky
Right.
mood. They're taking it out on the guy behind the counter who had nothing to do with it.
Hmm.
um, when they get
Exactly.
somebody that's nice, they're appreciated.
Exactly, and we're just sort of you're going against the current that they're experiencing, and you're adding something that's peaceful and benevolent, essentially, and that's part, and that, Royce, in my viewpoint, that's part of creating an abundant consciousness and an abundant life.
So by this kind of reasoning, one's pretty safe to assume you can destroy this and sabotage it with negative attitudes toward other people and other situations.
Well, and here's where I come from in my perspective, that we're all connected. You know, energetically, we're all connected. You know, I can breathe in cells from somebody in Tokyo in the next 3 hours. You know,
Better hope they don't
everything.
have AIDS.
Well, exactly. Well, whatever. But the point is, everything is inextricably connected. And essentially, what I do to you, I'm doing to myself. You know, it's like you throw garbage out the window of your car. That's garbage in the environment that we're all partaking of, right? So same thing. If I'm throwing garbage thoughts out there into the world, and I'm just doing it to myself. So in a way, it's selfish to be kind and benevolent, because that means that's what I'm going to experience in my personal universe, essentially.
Hmm. So if everybody's interconnected, if you do something bad to yourself, you're doing it to everybody else too.
Well, and yourself.
Yeah,
You
everybody
might
else
as
and
well just,
yourself.
you might, if you tell yourself you're a lousy SOB, or tell someone else, you might as well just say it to yourself. I know, that's an interesting one to wrap your head around.
Well,
But
yeah.
I do, I teach this love class. I've been doing it for many years, and how to connect to love. And that's one of the first things we talk to people about in the class, is like, you have to understand we're all going through the same thing. It may look a little different, but we're all struggling to be happy, to make a living, to figure out, what are the questions to life. We're all on the same journey in some form. We're all having a rough time, whether you know it or not. And when you can see that we have much more in common than not, and see that we're all part of the same consciousness, essentially, we tend to be more compassionate in general. You recognize, you're human just like me. You're struggling just like me. It's hard just like my life. You have scary things, whatever. And we're just nicer, and it makes it easier to attract love.
Yeah, and we are, like you say, we're all on the same path. I mean, we're all basically living life, trying to enjoy as much of it as we can enjoy before we make it to the end of that road.
Hmm.
There's not that big a lot of difference if you look at it that way.
Right. Well, and if you focus on commonalities rather than differences, there's many more than differences.
That's right. Your mother and my mother were both mothers.
Thank you very much.
I just had to throw that one in there. I forget which show I got that off from, though. I do remember getting it from a TV show, but I just can't remember which one.
Okay.
Um, Let me think about this here a minute now. There was something I had a minute ago, and I lost it. I was going to ask you about. Jesus, I may have to fill in with something else, and maybe to come back to me in a minute.
Oh, okay.
I've had to do that there before. Okay,
Me and you
so
both.
actually, doesn't you also want to watch how you speak about things in your life? You were kind of covering this here earlier. I don't think you really kind of went in depth on it too much, but when you start saying things like, I'm not any good at this, I'm not any good at that, aren't you kind of damning yourself to fail in what you're starting out to do before you actually start? Because if nothing else, what will happen is you'll give up on it sooner because you didn't believe in yourself in the first place.
Absolutely. I see that so much, where I mean, often the first part of my coaching with people who are working with me ongoingly is to get them to stop putting themselves down, stop using language that diminishes who they are. I think people want to be ahead of the game before someone else criticizes them, so they criticize themselves first. I don't know what the thinking is exactly. But it's like when you're saying those negative or self-diminishing things, then it also leads to how you feel about yourself. Maybe you think you're just sort of playing around, but if you say those things like, oh, God, I'm so stupid, or, I'm too old, or I'm too fat, or, I'm not smart enough, you're sending yourself a pretty significant message. And, you're essentially saying to the divine or into consciousness, you got it wrong. And life always mirrors back to us energetically what we're putting in. I mean, it's so, in a simple math equation here, you're accumulating debts energetically when you do that. And so just to get out of the habit of saying things that are self-diminishing, you start to feel better. And I have people like who are struggling with their body image or whatever, and sometimes it's just a chore to get them to notice one thing about their body they can say they like. Well, do you like your eyeballs at least, or your toenails, or just trying to get them out of that habit. But once people break the language habit of saying diminishing things and refusing to consent to it, essentially, self-abandoning, self-diminishing, things turn around pretty readily, right from just that one little thing.
Well, I'm pretty sure it does, because I've noticed, like, in the past in my own life, if I started even joking around about it and saying things that diminish myself, what would happen is over that period of the next few days, I would see this actually happening in the things that I was doing. I'd be doing things wrong that would make it stand out, and then eventually I'd end up convincing myself I wasn't just joking; it was true after all. In other words. Yeah,
exactly. Good point.
Because life will sit there and give you enough to make your own assessment with, to add to what you're already thinking. If I think if you go somewhere like that. My wife used to always say, like to sing that song, "Don't blame her, life made her that way." I think when people listen to like songs like that, they're writing their future life when they do it. In other words.
Yes. Exactly. We're completely on the same page there.
Getting yourself a mindset. You got to really be careful about that.
Mm-hmm. So, well, I made up my mind some years ago. I think it's when I turned professional in terms of being a psychic. I just said, you know what? I'm here on this planet in this life to fulfill my obligation to be Phyllis in the world. That's my divine obligation, that whatever that intelligence that gave me life put me here to do me. And I'm going to do me, and people can have their opinion about it, and that's perfectly fine, but I'm not going to be dissuaded by anybody's opinion. They can have it, but I'm going to stand up and do me and do it with pride and integrity, and that's me. And I think a lot of people have a tough time getting to that place because they're so concerned about what people are going to think of them, my parents, my friends, my the community at large. They don't give themselves permission to just be who they are without apology. And no one's going to agree with everything we say or who we are. Some people will, some people won't, some people will like us, some people won't. And we have to be okay with that. And I am.
Well, if you don't mind me being honest about that, because I've been watching people on this, especially on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And what it seems to me like is when it comes to people that's going to either agree with one thing you believe in or disagree, it really depends on their own personal belief system. If somebody's already a racist and you're, spouting racist material, all the racists out there are going to praise you and, cheer you on. All the non-racists out there is going to want to discourage you because so people, whether or not they think you're right or wrong, are basing it on their own personal belief, which how does that make them any more right or wrong than you?
Well, for me, it goes a tad bit deeper than that. I mean, because if you are, that person is presenting who they are for who they know them to be. Someone who is exclusive to others, whether it's racist or whatever, that person is really not in alignment with truth about life, that we're all connected and that someone is better or worse or, more or less, there's a flaw in that thinking. So,
I agree.
That may be their point of view in the moment, but it's certainly not a grounded or a thoughtful or a true point of view. They're just projecting that opinion in the moment, and they're identifying with it for some reason, which goes much deeper, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that. I'm just saying, though, why would it matter if people agreed with you or not if you knew it was based on their own personal system? In other words, that you had to agree with them before they agreed with you.
Right, exactly. I get what you're saying. Yeah, I get it.
And, that's basically seemed to me like the way life is right now, especially in certain fundamental churches or evangelicals or like that. But they're not the only ones. Liberals are, I think, just about almost everybody this seems to be true to me. This person knows what they're talking about. Mm-hmm. They never stop and say, let me investigate what they're saying, in other words.
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, and that kind of goes back to another point I made earlier. People identify with certain things as true because it makes them feel a certain way. I mean, me too, I suppose. I have my identifications. And if they hit up against something that doesn't match their identification, they're threatened and they get fearful and they have to push back. And for me in my work, I'm always talking to people about when you feel like you have to defend, you don't have to defend anything. Why are you going there? That's a contracted frequency. You don't have to defend anything. But then again, that lets you know that person is sort of in an egoic position. The ego has taken charge. And they're not really self-aware to recognize what their identifications are. And people identify with stuff for all kinds of reasons. When you talk politically, most kids will be what their parents are, for the most part, without thinking about it. And that's politically and religiously and all of the above. And so if you don't ever really take the time to, get to know yourself and what matters to you, and you just align with the loudest voice, then as soon as another voice comes in that doesn't match yours, you're going to be threatened and want to fight as opposed to understand.
Yeah, there's probably the same law applies to churches in as much as I think probably 90 to 95% of all members of church congregations would probably vote Republic every time around.
Mm-hmm. That may be true. I don't know the statistic. I don't know
them exactly. That's how I use the terminology, probably.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm pretty well convinced of it, but I couldn't sit here and prove it. And I'm the kind of person, I don't want to state anything being a fact unless I could take it to a court of law and prove it beyond the shadow of a doubt, because the more you're right about or you believe you're right about, the more you can be proved wrong about.
That's true. There's always another point of view, isn't there?
Always. Now, what would you say makes your book different from some of the other books out there that teaches about the law of attraction?
I think the specificity that I give real exercises, and when I say real, I mean they're specific. They don't leave anything up to the imagination, essentially. But it's good for people who are experienced spiritual or law of attraction people or beginners. It's not written to be like dumbed down or lesser than, but it's written in language that most anybody can understand and appreciate, and it's very specific. It says this is what you have to master to get to the next thing. And I think that a lot of law of attraction stuff doesn't give specifics. And I think the fact that it does, if you have a high school education, you're going to be able to, maybe even less than, you're going to be able to grasp what I'm saying. If you got a PhD, you're also going to be able to find it, interesting. So I think that's what makes a difference.
Okay, but what about the people that only got a grade school graduation? Where would they be with it?
Well, again, I think it'd be person by person, because just because you haven't graduated high school doesn't mean you're not smart. It just means, can you read? And so I guess someone else could read it to you if you can't read it and talk about it. So there's always ways to crack that nut. And then at some point, I'm going to put it on audio. I mean, it's too new to go down that road yet. And that's always a way to go.
Well, I can tell you that, like, for example, in my case, Due to the fact I had anger issues when I was a child and I fought a lot, I ended up only finishing the 8th grade. I mean,
Oh, okay.
I got a high school diploma, but I got it because they gave me high school credit for working on the job
Right.
instead of actually going to class. And they said that I'd actually already, able to do the 12th grade work anyway. There's no point to have to hold me in the classroom for me to be getting in fights every day. So
Right.
they just went along with it. I don't think they do that now, but this was way back in 79, 80 or somewhere back there
Hmm.
when they did still do this kind of stuff.
Well, see,
But
so you're the perfect case in that place. It doesn't mean that you're not smart or can't grasp the principles. It's just can you get them in you somehow,
well,
and
yeah,
you figure out how to
because
get the information you need to navigate. And it's the same way with this book or anything else, actually.
when I became a parent, I sent my kids to school, and they get into trouble, and I go talk to the teacher. Teachers would often say, "You sound like a professor. What do you teach?"
Oh,
And I'm
interesting.
like, "I only graduated 8th grade. Where do you get professor from?"
Ah, well, you do speak with authority, and you do sound educated. I mean, you sound like someone who's been around.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is I've read a lot, especially on the internet and books. I've read several hundred books, especially for the show over the last several years. But you were saying it yourself. There's ways to get this knowledge. It doesn't have to be in a classroom. And maybe I
Hmm.
don't know everything about algebra or trigonometry and some of that other stuff. But there's other things to learn besides just that. And some of that other stuff you only use if you choose a particular field that needs you to use it, in other words.
Exactly. Exactly. Couldn't agree more.
Which
And,
again,
and for purposes of this work, even for anyone listening to this show, there's three basic elements. You come to it with a sincere and open heart, desire to learn. Pay attention to how you feel, because if you're feeling stressed out, uptight, contracted, that's not where you want to be. You want to figure out the other side of that. How do I solve that? And then be consistent with it. I mean, that's the very general formula to the law of attraction. I mean, there's other steps, obviously, in there if you get stuck, but that's basically it. Can I be consistent? Can I have integrity and really have a sincere desire to grow? And can I pay attention to how I feel? And most people are so stuck up in their head trying to analyze things and measure it and qualify it. They don't really know how they feel. It's always amazing to me when someone will call me and say, what's my life purpose, or what's my next job supposed to be? And I'll say, well, what do you love? What do you like? I don't know. They've forgotten. They've gotten so disconnected from their own desires and what matters to them. You have to do some work just to uncover it. And so the point here is that being able to identify what you feel, and are you going to consent to that or try and alter it, is the name of the game.
what about the group that's out there? And these are usually people between their 20s and 30s, although it's not limited to that, that really have no goals, no thoughts of the future. They're just living in the here and in the now, and how they have fun in the here and the now.
Yeah. Well, I think that's fine for a time, but I think what I find is people who do not have a way to contribute to life that feels meaningful to them, whether that's art, whether that's medicine, whether that's the military, whether that's school teaching, whatever it is, if you don't have a way to make yourself feel like you matter in life and that your presence here matters, most people end up feeling really empty and awful about themselves. And I will tell you, most of my most challenging clients are those people who have unlimited resources and free time and no way to spend it that feels good to them. They have tons of anxiety, just all kinds of self-doubts, and start creating they become allergic to everything. Their relationships their lives tend to be a mess. So, you can just have pleasure and enjoy yourself for a period of time, but without any direction. But ultimately, that's going to come back and bite you
So
in the
you're
rear.
describing to me people who they probably have tons of purpose. They just don't know they have because they convince themselves they can't do it.
Exactly. And I think when people don't have challenge to overcome, they don't learn what they're made of. They don't know that they can do something. They've never had to climb a mountain. They've never had to work a job or get fired or learn how to get along. They've never had to develop those skills, those strengths, and so they don't know they're strong, and so they believe they're weak. And then they get into this whole little cycle of doing nothing because that's all they think they can do.
And once you're convinced of that, trying to unconvince yourself could be a job.
Oh, my goodness gracious, you said it. It is. Getting out of our own way is the number one challenge.
Especially getting old and getting set in your way. But I know for me, I like a challenge in life. I like to have problems to overcome. I get this little thrill every time I solve one. My brother-in-law Jerry was the same way. Every time he'd hit a hard problem and he'd spend several days working on it, when he finally solved it, he'd go, Me personally, I'll do this little, I win again. But you get this little thrill of victory, in other words. It's kind of like a little small mental rush. People, I think, who don't try to, meet challenges, they miss out on that little rush.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I tell you what, Royce, just in my own life, I've been working with a client for probably 4 or 5 months. Probably one of the most challenging clients I've ever had. And one of these people I referred to with lots of resources, but no way to spend her time. And it has been really difficult to work with her, but we finally had a breakthrough in the last couple of weeks, and things have gotten a lot easier. And last night I went to sleep going, I feel great. It's just like, yes, I got through it. Someone came into my experience that I hadn't dealt with before, and it was a challenge, and she tested me to my core, but I got her where she needed to be, and now I feel better, and now I feel better about myself, and and so there's always mountains to climb, so we can feel, I think it's how the divine works through us, that we keep growing and expanding, and we can kind of do the work that needs to get done here on the planet, and that's more of a spiritual viewpoint.
Yeah, and from my way of thinking, there's nothing like climbing a mountain to increase your self-confidence and self-esteem.
Yeah, well, exactly. Same difference, same thing.
And again, it all goes back to believing. Or a lot of it can often go back to nothing more than sheer determination. I mean, there are some people, I think, that have the ability to go into something doubting they can do it. They see a mountain there. They have no idea how they're going to do it. They're hoping and praying they can get away with it, but they're not willing to jump ship. They got enough determination that they're going to stick with it, even if they don't have a lot of faith in it. And then when a person like that actually achieves his goal, then he gets more encouraged to try it the next time and the next time, and that confidence and his self-esteem grows until they, become less afraid to try.
I agree. We train ourselves that we are capable. I can do it. And that's interesting. I have a client right now. She's a bodybuilder, and she wasn't always, but she got out of a long-term marriage that wasn't working for her for all the reasons. And she said, I'd never really found out who I was in life before I got married, and I decided I wanted to take on something that I didn't think was possible, and just to find out what I was made of. And now she's very close to going to a competition, and she's been working, like you said, determined and hard, and it was just an incredible act of courage to say I wanted to try something that I didn't think I could accomplish, and that's serious chutzpah.
Want to accomplish something I didn't think I could accomplish.
Yeah.
I like that one a lot.
Yes. And I think people do sometimes set their goals too low because they don't realize that they actually can do an enormous amount. But that client in particular isn't one of them.
Maybe a lot of it, though, goes back to childhood. It's so easy for parents to lose patience and, the way they talk to their kids when they're disciplining them or when their kids are making mistakes. And, they can really unintentionally bruise or damage their self-esteem to a point where when they're grown, they have trouble building it back up.
Agreed. Absolutely. I see that all the time. Not everybody knows how to be a good parent.
Well, there's no rule books to go with it. I mean, they got parenting classes, but I'll be honest with you, I've been to those classes, and nothing taught me as much about parenting as my kids did.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like you have a real open heart about it, and, you listen. You're a good listener.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. I try to do my best to listen, but yeah, for me, if a person wants to learn a lot about life, get married and have kids, you're going to learn a lot. It may be the hard way, but boy, by the time you're done with it, you'll have
Yeah.
something to show for yourself in your own personality, your own experience, your own self-esteem and confidence. And
Right.
um, if you do it right, you can even maintain a relationship with your kids after they're grown and out of the house.
Right.
I've seen
Agreed.
so
Yep.
many kids, they grow up and they can't wait to get out from underneath the tyranny of the parents who have no idea they're being tyrants.
Right. Exactly.
They want to run their children's life when they're fully grown, and a parent has to
Mhm.
realize that child's fully grown. All they have to do is say, bye bye, I'm going to go rip my home place so I can live my life the way I want to. You
Right.
can't stop them.
Exactly. Exactly.
When they're growing up, that's your time to be the disciplinarian and their friend. Once they're fully grown, it's supposed to be more friend, less disciplinarian.
Exactly. Exactly. I agree.
So that's where I think a lot of people miss the ship. Now we got about
Hmm.
5 minutes left. Is there any thing you want to cover real quick that I didn't think to ask about?
Um, I did want to let your listeners know that if anybody who buys my book off Amazon or Barnes and Noble, if you send me the receipt, I'm going to send you a free DVD of my series, Making the Connection to Your Abundance, which is also it's essentially a workshop setting to teach you how to change your money space or whatever you're trying to change, and that's just for people listening on your show. But in terms of the topic, the subject matter, I think we've covered a lot of great things in this hour, and just for people who are looking for love or looking for money, whatever they're looking for that you're trying to get into your experience, just know that it's possible, that there are ways to get there, and they should be enriching to you. Not that it doesn't require work or action, but there are ways to get there that don't require a lot of emotional crap. Essentially, you don't have to go through a lot of that. You can actually enjoy the process and feel fulfilled along the way, which is sort of the point. That it shouldn't just be happiness at the end of the pot of gold, but along the way. And I just hope people hear that message, and if that resonates, I'm your gal.
I gotta tell you, it seems to me like it'd be a lot harder to find that pot of gold along the way than it would be at the end of the road. Because you got so many naysayers along the path. In other words.
Hmm. Well, that's why it takes courage and determination to be your own person and to choose what is right for you. This is your life, not anybody else's, and I believe it's your divine obligation to fulfill your destiny, fulfill your heart, to fill the vision you hold in your own mind, and to know that if people fall away from your experience, whether it's friends or whomever, people will come back into your experience, into your life, who resonate with who you are. So if those people can't support you, let them go. And people will come into your life that will support you. There's plenty to go around, and you just have to honor yourself first, and that will happen.
Right. Now, also, is Amazon and Barnes and Noble the only kind of places, the retail stores that you can get your book, or do
Well,
you have a site? Or, I mean, you have a site, but I mean, a
yeah,
special place I could buy them straight from you, for example.
the book will hit on many retail outlets on July 20th. I don't know the whole host of lists that the publisher is sending it to. I know all the big ones, so whatever those are in your area. But of course, the online. The reason I direct to the online, because the book, it won't be out till July 20th. The publisher's giving 35% off, so it's and then they raise the price as soon as it hits the market. So, that's a good way to go. Or you can always go to my website and, I can send it directly to you, but I'm not quite as efficient as the online outlets.
Well, are you autographing the books before you send them?
If someone buys it for me, absolutely.
Well, that sounds like a winner right there to me. And one more time, real quick, I want to let everybody know your website address.
Well, it's my name. My name is Phyllis King. It's www.phyllisking, PHYLLIS King, KING, phyllisking.com.
Okay. Now, there was one other thing I was thinking about just a minute ago. I know what it was. Do you have any other books you're planning on putting out in the near future, or any other events?
Well, this is my fourth book, so I have several other books on my website, and I've got a bunch of DVDs and classes and things. But I am going to be out and about. I will be actually in Texas in January. I'm going to be in Austin, Texas, at the Unity Church on the Hill. That's a few months away, obviously. But starting in July, I'm going to be in Seattle, Washington, on the 23rd. Portland, Oregon on the 25th, and then Denver, Colorado, August 15, 16, 17. So any of your listeners from those areas, and then Los Angeles the end of August and the end of September. So I'm kind of around and about, and I love to meet people who've heard me on the radio. That's so fun. And people come up and say, I heard you on so-and-so's show. It's really, I know it's just fun to always know you reach someone in that way.
Right. Well, hopefully you come to Houston, you'll look me up.
Are you kidding? Of course. Of course.
I don't get out of town very much because I don't want to hassle with all the oxygen bottles and concentrators and
I get it.
Stuff like that.
Yeah, I get it.
So that puts us up to 2:00 when the show would be ending. I want to leave the door open in case you'd like to come back in the future. You can always just give me a call and let me know when you have some material you want to tell my listeners about.
Oh, that's an amazing offer. Thank you, Royce, so much. I would love to take you up on that.
I would love to have you take me up on it. I'd love to have my same guests come back time and time again. It kind of gives me the big head. I'm doing a good job.
Oh, you are. You're fantastic at this. I feel very appreciated and listened to and supported. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I certainly wish you the best with your website and with your books and with your, I guess, what would you call it, your program?
Sure. My programs. I have them.
The workshops, in other words, are...
Yes, the workshops. I'm always doing that as well.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to get with my wife for tonight's tacos and show her how to make them.
Very good. Thanks, Royce. I appreciate it. And you take care.
You too now. Y'all come back and see me again next Saturday at the same time, listeners. Bye-bye, everyone.